Good morning and welcome to Valley Views. I'm your host, Glenn Edison, and we're certainly glad to have you today. And we want to say a thank you to our host and sponsor, BTC Fiber. Today we have with us Robert and Michelle Elliott with ERA Solutions. And probably many of you are not familiar with ERA Solutions, but we want you to become familiar with them. So that's why we had them out over today. So Robert and Michelle, it's good to have y'all today. We want to thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for having us.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Glenn.
One thing I want us to, everyone to, first of all, give us maybe a little background on yourselves and what brought you to Dunlap and a little bit about your company.
Sure. Well, we're fairly new to Dunlap, been here about a year or so, and after retirement from public sector for myself and teaching for Michelle, career military service as well for myself, we decided we want to retire somewhere very pleasant, and we could have won a lot of different places, and of all the places, guess where we ended up? Right here in Secaucus Valley. So we're so happy to be here, and we want to share some of our experiences, and we were doing that through this business that we founded. Again, it's a veteran-owned business, and what we do is we use the skills that we've acquired over our decades of service to help particularly small businesses, but also nonprofit and other organizations, and we help them kind of assess their workforce, if you will. And we've all worked for organizations where we've had different thoughts or feelings, and sometimes we've never had the opportunity to share those fully with our employer. And had we had the opportunity, it may have made a difference for the small business in terms of less turnover, more commitment, just a healthier workplace, if you will. So we bring in our skill sets and our tools and techniques to help those businesses kind of get some insight that maybe they didn't have before, and really lead to some changes that can really make a good company into a great company.
Well, probably companies are just like us. We get in a daily habit and just go up day to day like we normally do, and sometimes we don't think about what's other ways we could do this or a better way.
Absolutely, absolutely. We've all had those personal experiences, whether we've been at the frontline worker or we've been in some supervisory capacity where we think we're pretty sure we understand how the workforce feels about different things, but there's always a little hesitation about the worker. Perhaps if we work for you, Glenn, to say, Glenn, everything is great except for this, because you might not take it that well. But what if we could adjust that one little thing, whatever it might be, maybe an hour worked later or earlier, or have a little bit of time over lunch to go do some errands. Something that small that doesn't cost anything might make a world of difference for employees. And if it's okay, I'd like Michelle to maybe describe one example we found with our recent work in the area, and that has to do with the top 2 things that we're finding that employees are saying are the most important to them. So if that's okay?
Yeah, sure, go right ahead.
So in our survey, we have them rank the top 10 choices that we provide for them, and it could be pay, it could be hourly shifts, and but the top 2 things that we're finding are respect and trust, and that's what we're finding across the surveys that we have done. Those don't cost the employer anything, but very valuable to the employee.
Well, a lot of times on the respect, sometimes that's just a pat on the back or a thank you, or I know you're doing a good job, appreciate it, that type of thing.
Right.
Absolutely, it's acknowledgement. You know, on the flip side of that, Glenn, is sometimes organizations fail to show respect to the other workers when there's some employees or a segment that maybe there needs to be some corrective action or some training and professional development that sometimes, I'm not saying that everywhere, sometimes it's easier not to deal with that issue. And so it's not really showing respect to the rest of the workforce, and they may get irritated and frustrated, but the owner or the manager or the supervisor doesn't know what they don't know. And so what we try and do is in an anonymous manner, where workforce employees would do a survey by clicking a link on an email or a QR code that they could scan, and it goes directly to us and our platform, our statistical analysis platform. And we have no names, we don't know who submits it, but we take the overall results, provide that to the owner, to the manager, to the supervisor, whoever would hire us, and we show them these different areas that are proven, these survey questions are proven in academic research to be valid, that they actually represent these 7 statements, for example, represent employee commitment. Instead of just saying, Glenn, are you committed to what you do? And you say yes or no, we know that's probably not valid, not because you're misleading, but because it's such a global question. There are other ways to do it, to kind of find out over several statements what your level is. It's not a yes or no question, it's to what degree, say on a scale from 1 to 10. And then if we reassess later, we can see after changes in training and policy and acknowledgement and communication, Does it change a year later? Can we see that improvement? So you're getting something, or the businesses are getting something that they don't have now. You can't go down the store and buy, what's the sentiment of your workforce. You can guess, you can
Right.
assume, you can base it on your experience, but there's limitations with those.
Well, is this something that when you initially do your surveys and everything, after you come back to the manager or owner, do you continue doing this maybe on a regular basis, every quarterly or whatever, semi-annually or something like that?
It's a great point, and we recommend that, again, we have a baseline when we do it initially so we know where we are, but then you don't know where you go from there unless you go back. It's almost like thinking your experience in the education system. We don't just have one report card at the end of the school year, but children have at least two, right? At least one each semester, so they can see the improvement from one
Right.
point to the other and think about it in the same concept. And the other really important feature, I think, is regardless of the measurements and where things are, by you as a supervisor taking time to allow a third party that doesn't have any influence on your career to ask us what we think, to give us a voice to share, that's worthy in and of itself. Just to
Right.
have you being willing to listen to us and go to a third party where our names aren't surfaced and we can see overall of all 10 employees or 15 or 7 or 700, where are we at in these different big areas.
Well, I know you're talking about the privacy of the surveys. A lot of employees, well, maybe not a lot, but I know some employees don't want their bosses or their supervisors to know what they think.
That's
Right.
absolutely
Afraid
true.
of retaliation, I guess, sometimes.
That's 100%, and I think that's what we're finding too. And if your boss surveys you and says, "What do you think of the workforce?" Of course, you're going to say it's awesome because you want a job tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so that's important. And I know one place that we worked with the manager and with the employees to do the survey. They, I think, for the employees, they were like, "Oh, someone else feels the same way I feel." So when we presented the results, we presented it to the employees. They were like, "Oh, so 90% people feel this way. Okay, that validates my feelings." And I know definitely what we're seeing when we're doing these surveys is the pandemic, the COVID has increased the stress level at work.
Right.
Based on, different places, whether they've had to cut back, whether, you have more procedures as taking a temperature, masks, wearing, those kind of things. And so that's heightened some anxiety at work, per se. So that we have found that across.
Right. And, I know a lot of employees, like I say, the owner, he may have his own train of thought of where he wants to go, and the employees are thinking, well, here's another way it can be done, but they don't ever hear that point because maybe the owner's not thinking necessarily bad, just maybe hasn't thought of that idea,
Absolutely. And it takes an organization, they take some risk. If I ask you what you think about my outfit today, I'm taking a risk because you might say, you know what, your outfit's fine, but you might want to get a little looser clothing because you could lose some weight, Bob. You could say that. So I'm taking a risk, but I'm getting feedback that maybe I need to hear. And it doesn't have to be negative. In fact, you might compliment me and I might think, you know what, I thought maybe this was not the right color coordination, but Glenn thinks it is, and that's what matters to me. So it's not just about finding problems. But we had another organization where they were surprised, like they thought there were concerns in a certain area, and they were surprised that was really one of the high areas that were rated by employees. So they learned something that they had, an assumption about that was totally wrong, and they felt really good about that. So what value do you put into that to have some clear understanding between the workforce and the owner, manager, supervisor, however the organization is organized?
Because really I see your company is actually helping these companies, not trying to hurt them or anything. You're trying to help them.
Absolutely. We know every company, no matter what organization it is, can be retail, it can be health, it can be public safety, it can be public works, it can be the local store, or it could be a factory or manufacturing, transportation. We know that they're competing with their competitive peers, right?
Right.
And so they want to keep the workforce and they want to maintain the best employees. And I think about truck drivers. Every semi you see go by, what's that on the back of it? Drive for us, 1-800, so many cents a mile. They know who's looking at the back. It's other truck drivers, right? And so it's the same thing in any industry. And so if you don't invest in your employees on the front end, you're going to pay for it and the turnover later. And doesn't mean they don't like the company. They just had another opportunity that they went to.
Right.
And we know the cost of recruiting and training and the onboarding procedures and all the things that go with that. You've got to tie somebody up with training. and that's great. But if you have a turnover rate that you could lower because individuals in an organization really are even more committed because of what you do and how you do it. Not that there's bad owners or managers, but you're more open to things like, let's do an assessment, let's find out the sentiment of the employee workforce, and then let's make adjustments and make them even more committed, because even if it changes 10% or 2% of your employee retention, over the country, it's billions of dollars in turnover costs that companies face.
Just
Right.
one example, I didn't mean to interrupt you, sorry.
no, go right ahead.
One example that we just ran across when we were talking to a customer, he said that he lost an employee based on income, and that they were going to drive to Chattanooga. And he said, if I just knew that ahead of time, I could have worked that out with them. And so now he's retraining, taking time off of him doing what he needs to do to find an employee and retraining. And he said, I need to know what's going on so that I can keep my employees.
Yeah, because I think even myself, when I was younger in other jobs, I was always afraid to tell the boss something because fear of they may not like it, and
Mm-hmm.
I might not have that job. And I think that's a fear of a lot of employees. Now, y'all don't just do around here. I mean, you do other areas, right? With your business.
Right. Yes, so we're looking at a 4-hour radius around
Uh-huh.
here, but we also have reached outside of that. We did a company in Boston, we did a company in Illinois, so we're willing to work outside of the Dunlap area, but we do want to tribute to Dunlap since we live here.
Yeah.
And so a lot of things right now can be done remotely.
Uh-huh.
And though we do prefer to meet with people face to face if things are calmed down with the pandemic, and we have been able to do that because we're able to present the survey specifically to the needs and the questions that they want to know.
Uh-huh.
And one question that we just recently did was they wanted to know if people knew who their direct supervisor were. They thought that was a breakdown in communication. So we were able to add that question in, and they were able to find that out.
Right, because a lot of people in companies, they don't know who to go to. They might go to the wrong person
Mm-hmm.
and be sent back to another person.
Right.
And a lot of small companies, Glenn, they don't have all the policy and procedures of larger companies.
Right.
And they just work it out. But as they grow, which is a good thing, it becomes more confusing. For example, if you used to have 4 employees, now you have 14, and then you have 24. It's a good problem. They're growing, but they don't have the policy, so there's some breakdown in communication, as Michelle mentioned. I do want to mention, if I can, just a moment, that
Sure.
in our journey so far, we haven't done it alone. We've got help from others, and from the Small Business Developmental Center, Josh Brown is kind of an advisor, and any businesses can reach out to their small business developmental centers at offices out of Chattanooga, and also in here in Dunlap. Janice Kaiser, of course, we're all familiar with through the chamber, did the Co-Starters program for us and a number of other small business startups in Dunlap, Sequatchie County area, and so that was very helpful to go through that 10-week course. And then at University of Tennessee there in Chattanooga, the Veterans Entrepreneurship Program, and Frank
Uh-huh.
Butler is a professor there and an advisor, and he's really been instrumental too in that program. There's about 13 of us veterans that have started business in some process. So if we look across from those resources that are helping us here in Dunlap, it really is interesting to see how willing they are to help out. And I just mentioned that Dunlap Industries here, we've researched, and we know that over 50 years ago they started with University of Tennessee in Chattanooga startup program, and local Dunlap residents helping get that started, at least my
Yeah,
understanding of the
right.
history. And over 50 years, from a couple people to now up to 100 or more, and really with customers around the world. So right here in Dunlap, we can see how this process of getting these types of organizations helping out
Right.
can really help startups get started. And so we want to thank them for their assistance.
Well, and that's good that you mentioned that, because a lot of companies do not know they have those alternatives for help.
Yes,
Mhm.
makes
There's
a big difference.
We've watched a lot of webinars
Uh-huh.
that were provided through Zoom. They were free to us to help us learn, and so for other people, they're available for them. We also have another piece to our business besides employee surveys. We also do customer surveys.
Uh-huh.
And so that way you're able to get feedback on, a product, and we can put a QR code, or they can have a hyperlink put on your product. So for example, Kathy's cakes that she does, the Flamingo Bakery, she
Uh-huh.
can just put a QR code on her box, and somebody can be able to assess her cakes, and then that would come to us directly, and then that information then would go to her. So that's another option that people can be able to put that on their product.
Well, that's good to know. So you're not just necessarily for the businesses, but also for customers.
Mm-hmm.
Because businesses need to know if they're going in the right direction or not, right?
Right.
Just as you brought up earlier, Glenn, that sometimes you might be a little hesitant to go to your boss and say, I think this. Well, a lot of times we're like, oh yeah, this product is great. If you go and you buy something retail and you get the surveys, it's easier because you don't know if you're going to have contact with them again. You don't want to say anything too negative. But if it's a third party and it's anonymous, you're getting valid, reliable feedback. Even if it's 2% of your customers, you can make a little adjustment and make those customers happy so they don't go away. You don't have that turnover in customers. And then maybe you also have some incentives where if they refer a new customer to you, there's maybe a discount or something. So those are the types of things we can do too with our survey platform that we use to reach out to customers for just small businesses.
Well, customer service should be a big thing for most companies because that could hurt you or
Right.
help you.
Absolutely, you're
Well,
competing.
What we found out is we've done a lot of customers in our research,
Uh-huh.
and they're 17 questions long. They want to know your income, your sex. Those kind of things are just data they're collecting. We're doing 3 to 5 questions. We're done. And people's time is valuable. And so what the person that has the product, they just want to know, was it okay? And what if there's something that wasn't, let me fix it, let me know.
Yeah.
And so the 17 questions, people aren't going to continue to do that. So I think you can get the real data
Well, I
real
know
quick.
I get tired of those long surveys, even from the companies like some of the medical companies that I have to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll send me a survey, and I thought, if I didn't like you, I wouldn't keep coming back. And,
Right.
And it's long surveys.
Yes. So we saw that as a concern, so we wanted to go shorter with those questions.
And I think the customer would like a shorter survey. I know I would.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Right. And the person that has the product just wants to know, is it okay? What could I do to improve it? Where can I go from here to build my own business?
Well, before I forget this today, of course everybody can see the sign, but this is how you get in touch with you. And we want to make sure everybody knows that, so if they have any questions about things they might need, they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely, and we are glad to work with companies, small sole proprietorships of just the owner. We can help with their customer issues. Not that there's issues, but we can help develop that area, I think, at a really reasonable cost point, because we want to have happy customers ourselves. So the more customers we get that are happy with our services, we can share that with other customers and grow. Or I've done an agency as large as 1,700 employees. So from the individual employee, owner, operation to a handful to a small business. So we can work with you, and we want to work with you. And your success is our success. And so we see it as win-win. And so in terms of the pricing, very flexible on that. And again, we think we're providing you a service, information that they don't already have. It's just assumptions. And we want to verify your assumptions, or maybe have owners learn something new.
Well, and maybe you said this earlier and I just slipped my mind, but you do go on site sometime.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, it's subject to the client's desire, and we've done in person. And could you imagine having a survey that you've done and you actually get the results, and you see the results, not what you said, but how, as Michelle mentioned, how you compare to others. You know what you check, no one else does, and you see that 72% others did or did not. And talk about risk and giving credibility to the owner when they bring in the employees, if they choose to do this, or we do a report and give it to the owner, and they can do however they want to share it or not share it. But again, rarely does that ever happen in organizations. You fill it out, and that's the last you see of it. We do it differently. We think transparency and visibility and that trust and respect of an owner with their employees really makes that commitment stronger. And we know because we can measure it.
The last 2 times we've done it, the owners have stepped aside, and we've presented it to the employees because they wanted them to feel comfortable there. And then we separately met with the owners and gave them a compiled information for them. And we present it in an easy format for everybody to understand it. They can see the results, and they can feel free to ask us questions.
Well, that way employees feel like they're a part of something. When you're meeting with them and they get to talk.
Right. And I want to be clear that the reason that we can do this research is that Bob worked on his doctorate degree, and so he has the research background, that the questions we're asking are research-based questions.
And as you can tell from Michelle, she's the social person, right? More outgoing, and she's a career school social worker. So she's familiar and comfortable talking to people, whether it's parents, administrators, students, and so she has the ability to communicate effectively with people in small groups or large groups. So that's so important. I can do the analysis and have the stats and the graphs and the charts, but somebody has to be able to communicate that in a way that people understand. So together, we think we're a good partnership for this, and we can really help organizations.
Well, that's great, because I know it. Sometimes, like you said, you got all the statistics, but then someone to relay it to everybody
Exactly.
in a way. You know, talk to them on their level, so to speak.
Yeah, because we can get really carried away with statistics, as we know, margin of error and things. We just put nice graphs people can look at, color-coded, visually appealing, and Michelle can explain that. So.
You don't do politics, do you? You don't get percentages in politics, do you?
In polling? No, we're about the most important things in the world, which is workplaces, workforces, owners of businesses, and employees. That's what's really important. That's what really drives community, and we're glad to be a part of that. We want to grow with the community in helping with those areas.
Well, I was just kidding about that. But it seems like they need a lot right now, a lot of help.
Yes.
But well, that's good. And again, I want to make sure everybody can get in touch with you. Bring up the sign, ERA Solutions Group. And that's Robert and Michelle Elliott. And there's the number in case you need to get in touch with them. And they're local, and that's a key ingredient. We try to do local, and that's what we're trying to do. And is there anything else y'all want to add before we finish?
Well, I'd just like to say this on the United States Marine Corps birthday, 245 years. I was never a Marine, I was a soldier, but worked with many fine Marines. I know our community has a number of Marines and veterans.
Yes.
This is a really veteran supportive community. Another thing that brought us to this area. And so just an early Veterans Day thank you to all the veterans and to those Marines today. I know you're celebrating the big birthday today. And again, that's so important to us. And being a veteran-owned business, and Michelle, not only a veteran's wife, but also a mother of an Army soldier, a Ranger, Army Ranger. And so, she's dealt with those types of situations. She can deal with any organization as any veteran can. You've been through sort of the trenches in one way or another. And so I just wish we have a great Veterans Day. I know there's some safety precautions being taken this year for the health and benefit of our veterans and their families and community. But we can all celebrate Veterans Day in our own way. Maybe reach out, phone call somebody that we know that's a veteran. And so I just kind of wanted to end my spiel with that appreciation for the community support of the veterans.
Well, I appreciate it. Appreciate y'all being with us.
Thank you.
Folks, we appreciate you. And remember, you can see this interview on Bledsoe Telephone's BTC Fiber YouTube page shortly after we get this edited. And so watch those interviews and other interviews that we have on the BTC Fiber YouTube page. And again, thank you for being with us today.
Brought to you by Bledsoe Telephone Cooperative, your full-service telecommunications provider right here in the Sequatchie Valley.